Smoking weed and sobriety? Is that really a thing? Hey family, welcome back to Recovered on Purpose. Today, we're talking about something that's getting more and more common in recovery circles. And honestly, it's something we need to talk about because lives are on the line. And I'm not here to avoid the hard stuff. Let me be clear about something off the bat though. I'm not here to tell anyone how to live their life. I'm not against anyone personally, but I am someone who lives and breathes recovery. And I've watched what works, what doesn't, and what's dangerous to assume. This topic, it's about marijuana and whether it could actually be holding some people back from reaching their full potential in recovery. Before we dive in, check out the recovery merch in the link below. Every purchase supports the mission and starts a conversation about sobriety. And if you or someone you love is struggling, we've got our free resources on our website to help right now. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can reach more people who are living recovered on purpose. There's a growing trend out there called California Sober, where people quit the hard drugs and even alcohol, but still use weed or even psychedelics. And while I'll always support someone doing anything to get off fentanyl or heroin and stay alive, I also want to lovingly challenge the idea that using mind-altering substances, especially marijuana, leads to true, lasting recovery. Because for people like me, it doesn't. So if you're someone who's California sober or thinking about trying weed again in your recovery, this video's for you. I invite you to keep an open mind and heart. Let's have the real conversation. First, why is the topic of marijuana so tricky in recovery? Marijuana is one of the most socially accepted drugs out there. It's legal in more states than not. You can walk into a dispensary, talk to someone in a lab coat, and walk out with a pretty package like you just bought some tea. It's marked as natural, safe, even therapeutic. And for some people, those without addiction, who use it under medical supervision for things like cancer or seizures, it might be. But for people in recovery, especially from drugs like heroin, meth, or alcohol, marijuana isn't always the harmless fallback it's sold as. Why? Because it still affects your brain. It still alters your mental state. It still produces dopamine artificially. And for people who have what I have, the disease of addiction, that's a risk that can cost everything. I've watched people convince themselves that smoking weed would help them manage stress or take the edge off, only to find themselves spiraling back into old behaviors. It starts with a joint, then maybe a vape pen, then maybe a couple drinks, then suddenly, fentanyl. And the scary part is, marijuana is slow. It doesn't blow up your life overnight like heroin might. It's a quiet thief. It steals your drive, your purpose, your connection to God. And because it's so socially acceptable, you might not even notice it happening. But it's just a plant, right? Let's tackle this one head on. One of the most common things people say to defend marijuana is, it's just a plant. And you know what? They're right. It's a plant. But so is the poppy plant. That's where heroin comes from. So is the coca plant. That's where cocaine comes from. Just because something is natural doesn't mean it's harmless. Nature can heal or it can destroy. It depends on how we use it and what kind of body and brain we're putting it into. And if you're in recovery from addiction, your brain doesn't work like everyone else's. Sorry. Let's talk about the disease of addiction some of us have. See, the disease I have doesn't care what the substance is. If it alters my mind, it wakes up a craving inside me that doesn't stop until I'm homeless, heartbroken, and hopeless. I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say, it's just weed. I'm not drinking. I'm not using heroin. And then 6 months later, they're gone, using again. Or worse. This isn't judgment. This is experience. If you're watching this and you relate to the kind of addiction that had you destroying your life, you need to know, moderation doesn't work for us. Substitution doesn't work for us. Because once that mental obsession and physical craving kicks in, it doesn't care how you got there. And for people like us, weed can be a trigger. Not just a gateway drug like people used to say in school, but a spiritual gateway that pulls us back into the darkness. So, what would have happened if I had used weed in early recovery? I often think about what might have happened if I had chosen to use marijuana in my first year clean. What would I have missed? Would I have written my book? Would I have gotten on stages and shared my story? Would I have shown up fully for the people I sponsor? Maybe, but probably not. Because I know myself. Weed would have softened the edges of the pain I needed to face. It would have dulled the urgency that drove me to seek God, to serve others, and to live with purpose. And I would have missed so much of the life I have now. We do need to touch on the case for harm reduction with marijuana maintenance. Now hear me clearly. If someone is using marijuana instead of fentanyl and it's keeping them alive, I'm not knocking that. I'm glad you're alive. I'm glad you're not overdosing. Harm reduction has its place. Survival matters. But what I want you to ask is this. Is that where it ends? Are you surviving or are you living? If you're using marijuana as a bridge to real recovery, to real healing, that's one thing. But if it becomes the new coping mechanism, the new escape, the thing that keeps you from having to face your thoughts and emotions raw, you might be stuck. So what are some things marijuana may be costing you? You might not be losing your house or overdosing, but you might be losing something else. Purpose, passion, clarity, a deep connection with God or your higher power. Marijuana is known for its short-term effects: hungry, happy, sleepy. But ask yourself, is that the life you want to build in your recovery? For me, recovery isn't about being comfortable all the time. It's about being alive. It's about becoming who I was meant to become. Being of service, living in alignment with purpose, being sharp, clear, dependable, present. Weed blurs that. Even if you're not falling apart, you might be falling short of the life you were created for. And if you're someone who knows you're meant to help others, to lead, to speak, to serve, you might be settling for silence when you were meant to speak up. Here are some scientific facts about marijuana you should know. The National Institute on Drug Abuse reports that around 30% of people who use marijuana develop some level of marijuana use disorder. For people who start young and use daily, that number jumps even higher. And while some say weed isn't addictive, science says otherwise. It impacts the brain's reward system the same way other addictive substances do, messing with dopamine production and motivation regulation. THC affects brain areas related to memory, learning, attention, decision-making, coordination, and emotion. Chronic use has been linked to lower motivation, also known as amotivational syndrome, cognitive decline, increased anxiety and depression, and a higher risk of developing psychosis, especially in those genetically predisposed. Recovery is the process of rebalancing the brain's reward system. Weed dumps artificial dopamine into a brain already healing. That creates confusion and inconsistency in emotional regulation, which for us can be fatal. So let's reflect together. Are you clear about yourself and your choice with this? Let me ask you this. When was the last time you felt totally clear? What do you reach for when you're alone and uncomfortable? What are you afraid would happen if you stopped using everything? Sit with those questions, because sometimes the thing we think is helping us cope is actually keeping us stuck. Now for the California Sober dilemma. Let's come back to this idea of being California sober. Like I said before, I'm all about agency. I'm not here to tell anyone how to recover. But what worries me is when people who can handle weed try to convince people like me that we can too. That's dangerous. That kind of advice can kill someone. Because the truth is, some of us have a disease that lies in wait. A disease that doesn't care that marijuana is legal. That doesn't care that someone else can handle it. For us, mind-altering substances are like a key that unlocks something we fought like hell to lock away. So if you're someone who is California sober and it's working for you, that's your path. I respect your right to walk it. But please, don't preach it to someone whose story you don't fully understand. Because if they try it and it wakes up the beast, they might not come back. Now I've heard people say, but I function just fine on weed. Maybe that's true. Maybe you hold a job, pay your bills, and keep your relationships intact. But let me ask you, are you just functioning or are you thriving? Are you building the life you once dreamed about when you hit bottom? Or are you just making it through the day? There was a long period of time in my addiction where I was in sales, had stable housing, made 6 figures, and hid the fact from everyone around me that I was shooting up before, during, and after work. I was functioning just fine too, until all that stuff I had went into my arm and I woke up in a homeless shelter and then woke up the morning after getting kicked out of the homeless shelter. Anything I say on this topic or any other opinion I have about pathways of recovery is to cause you to turn inward and truly have the conversation with yourself about what the risks are compared to what the rewards are. Is risking years of your life smoking weed and not being your best self worth being able to get high? Or worse, is the risk of going back to your drug of choice, however big or small it is, worth the ability to get high? Recovery isn't just about survival. It's about transformation. If weed is numbing your ambition, your drive, or your relationship with your creator, it's worth a second look. So now I want to speak to you directly from the heart. If you're considering smoking weed again in your recovery, I want you to ask yourself honestly, why? What are you hoping it'll solve? What could it cost you in the long run? And what would your recovery look like if you were 100% clear, sharp, and fully present? There's no judgment here, only a challenge to be honest with yourself and to choose the life you really want. I believe in you. I believe you were created for a purpose, and I believe that purpose is bigger than hungry, happy, sleepy. What if you gave it up? What if you let your brain truly heal, your spirit truly awaken, and your purpose truly unfold? You might feel everything, and that's the gift. Real clarity, real peace, real joy. You might cry more, laugh louder, serve deeper, Show up for people in ways weed would never allow you to. You might become the person others can count on, the speaker, the leader, the person who changed a generation of recovery because you were brave enough to let go of something harmless. If you've had experiences with California Sober, whether good or bad, want to hear about them, drop them in a comment. Let's have the conversation. Let's keep it real. You never know who might need to read your story today. Thank you for being here. If this video helped you, hit like, share it with someone you love, and subscribe for more content about recovery, purpose, and becoming everything you were meant to be. You're not alone, and your recovery matters. I love you guys so much, and see you in the next video as you continue living Recovered on Purpose. If you want to watch my TEDx talk, Relapse Prevention Failed, you can click right here. Or if you want to watch the 4th step inventory guide, you can click right here. Make it quicker and simpler.